G2 is usually EU's only hope at doing well internationally, and this has been the case since at least 2019, right? And that is why, after what I would call a disappointing 2025, I was extremely disappointed to hear that G2 would be keeping their roster consistent going into 2026. And with G2's debut in LEC versus Week 1 ending in a 1-2 scoreline, losing to MKOI, who they were dominant over in the end of 2025 and as well as Worlds, and losing to GX, who should be a middle-of-the-pack team, I think G2 has truly lost a step, which is disappointing to say. And I don't think they just lost a step gameplay-wise. I think they might have lost a step as an org too, which really scares me. So, a little context about my relationship with G2. G2 wasn't always my outright favorite org, and still to this day, I root more for MKOI, but I deeply respect and often root for G2 because they are usually the best team in EU, meaning they are usually EU's best chance at winning and placing well at an international event. I also super appreciate that they almost never have imports on the team, so it truly feels like EU is being represented when G2 attends internationals. I've said many times that part of the reason why I don't follow NA is because what pride am I supposed to feel when a roster of 2 to 5 imports is winning under an NA banner? It just feels inauthentic and boring, so not a fan. So in my opinion, even if you are a Fnatic, MKOI, or KC guy, in my opinion, you can't call yourself an overall EU fan if you don't root for our number one representative when we go to internationals. And since it's often G2, I find that I am often very invested in G2. The other part that I really like about G2 is that their entire brand, even outside of League of Legends, always seems to be around trying to be the best. And the best part about their LEC team is that they are not just concerned with being the best in EU, they want to be the best in the entire world, which is extremely rare in the West. They are one of the only teams that is not satisfied with winning domestic titles alone, right? In 2023, they won 3 out of 4. In 2024, they won 4 out of 4. And I would argue that winning in a format with more splits is way more difficult than it was to win 2 splits back in the day, right? You have to peak at different times. It's a lot to get into. I'm not going to get into it now. So that's really hype. And yet, despite having that dominance, they weren't satisfied, right? And G2 does not only strive to do well internationally, they believe they can do well internationally, which is really important for later when I talk about management, so hold that thought. And literally, they are the only team in the West, and I want to take a time to bring this up, they're the only team in the West in the last 3 years to take a game or series, I should say series, because that's actually the most accurate thing, the only Western team to take a series off of an Eastern team in the last 3 years. I say game, I'm not allowed to say anymore because, well, one, FlyQuest has taken games like, they went to 5 games against Gen G, they went to 3 games with HLE, and I think one other LCK team at Worlds or something. But also, what the hell is it? 100 Thieves also took a game off of BLG, which I completely forgot about and is fucking hilarious and just speaks to the fact that BLG was so bad that year. Anyway, so here's the thing. G2 could have easily coasted on the profitable and successful brand of the 2024 roster, right? Popular names, amazing domestic results, right? They could have coasted for years. And I don't think, despite fans probably being a little bit disappointed, I don't think that fans were outright demanding change, right? But G2 decided to take a massive risk anyway in the hopes of reaching a higher peak. And I respect the shit out of that. So in comes G2 2025. As you all know, Mickey or former support Mickey and jungler Yike were replaced with Labrav and Skumond. And this was marketed literally immediately, as early as their opening teaser or their roster announcement pre-LEC Winter 2025. The messaging was that this decision was being made while aware that there would be potential immediate performance and consistency decreases, but it would be worth it for the potential peak international level increase. They were saying this immediately, right? However, if you followed G2 in 2025, you would know they had shaky regular seasons. They would spark in playoffs and kind of bring back, fan belief and excitement, all to just fizzle out by the time finals came around twice in a row, getting 3-0'd by KC in winter and then 3-1'd by MKOI in spring. And although they won summer in dominant fashion, their MSI and EWC were terrible, and I would argue so was their Worlds appearance. Now, at Worlds, this is why it's controversial to say that, they did accomplish what they failed to do 2 years in a row, which is make quarterfinals. In 2023, they lost a really important and embarrassing series to NRG, right? And so that allowed NRG to qualify. And then they lost to BLG, which really sucked. But BLG was, I believe that year, were they first? No, I think they were second. Oh, yeah, because JDG was first. Yeah, anyway, they lost to the number 2 seed. Sucks. And yeah, whatever. They don't make it that year. But then in 2024, when they were clearly stronger than 2023 and had really improved macro, they again get a pretty shitty draw. By the way, actually, I want to point out real quick, G2 beats Damwon, Kia, and Weibo, which I know they're both 4th seeds, but doesn't Damwon go against... Oh, I thought Damwon went against someone else. Anyway, not important. I guess NRG went against Weibo and they lost, so, what's their excuse there? 2024 comes around and G2 gets kind of shitty draws again. They go up against HLE, which was the number 1 seed from LCK. I know Gen G is probably would be considered stronger at the time, but still, HLE, that's an insane draw. They beat Weibo, and then they go into T1 and BLG and best of 3s, which dude, they were literally the World's finalists. And yes, you could say, which I do agree, I have to admit, T1 was the 4th seed, so even in the pool system or whatever, I think G2 would have suffered. They could have run into T1 no matter what, but it just speaks to the fact that I freaking hate this Swiss stage. The number 1 seed from Europe going against the number 1 from Korea and the number 1 from China, I think is ridiculous, especially when FlyQuest fans get to brag about making quarterfinals and they lose to the 2 Eastern teams they go up against. I think DK was the 4th seed from LCK, and they couldn't freaking beat them. Whatever, not important, I guess. All right, so finally in 2025, G2 gets some revenge with an easier run. They do lose to Top Esports, which was alarming, but then they beat MKOI in the run back, beat BLG, who was looking atrocious, and they ultimately don't make it to quarters, and then they beat FlyQuest, which was some nice revenge from 2023. The thing is, though, as someone who has defended G2 2024 so vehemently, well, actually, wait a second. I'm in a different part of my script. What's it called? So, the hill that I will die on, and I've literally fought this time and time again, and you can go back into my previous videos to see the evidence of this. G2 2024 was a great roster and so much better than their results, especially internationally. They 3-0'd Top Esports at MSI, they took T1 to 5 games, and at Worlds, I will try and remind people every chance I get, they are still the only Western team, especially at that time, to have taken a series off of an Eastern team since 2023. Right? NRG didn't do it, and despite going to Game 5 against Gen G, FlyQuest didn't do it either. So the most frustrating part for me is that after defending G2 2022 so vehemently, G2 still ultimately decided to make changes, promising those higher highs that I mentioned, and they did not deliver. They did terrible at MSI 2025, losing to BLG 0-3 and then Gen G 3-1. And again, this is a weaker BLG who goes to 5 games against FlyQuest. Oh shit. And then they also lose to FlyQuest 0-3. Yeah, I forgot about that. Almost missed it. And then at EWC, this shit annoyed the hell out of me. I'm cursing so much. They beat Furia, which is okay, but didn't they freaking lose in MSI to them or something? Or they lost a game. It wasn't pretty. G2. Yeah, they freaking go to 5 games against Furia. Then at EWC, just a week later, beat them, then beat Fly in a best of 1, and then they're celebrating they're actually quarterfinalists at a big tournament. And then they, 2-1 BLG. All right, cool, but BLG was clearly ass, and then they get 2-1 by Gen G. I'm happy they took a game, but still, not impressed. Now, what am I trying to say here? Finally, at Worlds, they make it to quarters, and I feel like G2 was so clearly, if I had the footage, I would pull it up. They did this interview afterwards, the Caps recaps with Caps, and they were trying to hype up yeah, we finally did it. We made it to the quarterfinals. The thing is, they did it by getting lucky. And they kind of were trying to treat it like, oh, we're better than G2 2024. You see, this was the right move. This did pay off. And to me, it was so evident that it was just copium, right? They would then go to the quarters, and Top Esports, which was not a good team, by the way, not a good team. They get 3-0'd by T1. They barely made it into the quarterfinals by barely beating BLG. I don't know if you should go back and watch that series because it was very close and very ugly. And yet G2 gets 3-1 by them. And that was honestly, besides maybe CFO, the luckiest draw G2 could have gotten. And yet they still botched it. They looked horrible. They go home, right? And what really pisses me off, because I swear to God, go back to my old videos, and I should have editors to do that, but not the point right now. Basically, if you go back to my old videos, I literally talked up G2 2024 so highly. I was against the roster changes, and then only after losing in World Quarters did Kadril and I Will Dominate, or whoever, I mean, Kadril was really the only one that I remember hearing directly, did they finally admit, I think G2 2024 actually was stronger than G2 2025. No fucking shit. I hate that I had to wait until the end of the year to get some validation on that. All right. So it kind of felt like after a year, right, this team was not better, right? We did not have that better international peak that was promised. And back to what I was saying about G2 being willing to take risks. If you guys remember, in 2022, G2 had taken a massive risk letting go of their 2019 to 2021 roster of Wunder and Mickey X and Grabs and Duffman, which is huge. And they let go of Reckless, who they had just signed, which was a really big deal. They instead get Broken Blade, which was risky. He ended up turning out amazing, but, still at the time was a very risky pickup. And then Flacket and Targamas, who were both rookies at the time, right? And this org surprisingly won spring, but just getting second place in summer and missing quarterfinals was enough for the team to blow up the roster. At the time, I would have argued that you need to give these rookies more time to develop, and I would have been wrong, because actually the change was genius. They even swapped out Jankos, which was like mind-blowing at the time, but they go for Yike. They get Hansama, who Hansama was coming off of a terrible year with Team Liquid in 2022, and then they re-signed Mickey X, which, depending on who you ask, at the time, I thought Targamas was better than Mickey X. I thought he could, not necessarily better, but I thought he had potential to kind of grow into a Mickey X level player, and I thought that Mickey X was kind of on the downswing. But Mickey comes back, and they dominate better than ever. So an insane risk 2 times over. It pays off in 2022, not satisfied. Then they do it in 2023, pays off. Now they do it in 2025, it doesn't pay off. And so if you look at 2022 as an example, you would think that if, getting second place in summer and not qualifying to World's Quarters isn't enough, why would getting second, 7th, 8th, 4th, or whatever, and 4th in EWC is so stupid, and then, ending in quarters at a 3-1, why would we then think that this is amazing and let's hold on to this team? Mickey X was likely going to be let go by Fnatic, right? He wanted to part ways. I think if G2 made an offer, they would have taken it. Mickey would have taken it. And on top of that, I do apologize because I should have done a little bit more research on this. But from what I've heard, there was an opportunity for G2 to acquire Inspired and Busio, the literal 2 best parts of FlyQuest by far. And they seemingly turned it down to keep this roster going, which is omega disappointing. Like, if that's true, that's insane. And you got to remember, there are rumors of after 2024, G2 looking to part ways with Hansama, willing to make like a 3-way trade plus Romain to try and just get Kalist. That's how much they value him. So why would they value a rookie who hasn't really shown that much? Like, he's shown promise, but it's not like he's delivered internationally or whatever, over the successful Inspired and Busio? That's a whole nother story, but massively disappointing if true, right? They're committing and doubling down on this roster when I just don't think it's working. Let's talk a little bit about this roster, okay? Especially with the context of LEC versus in mind. So one of the biggest things that's been mentioned is that Skumon is not a jungler who's super proactive on the map, right? He's really about playing for himself. Now, before, G2 had Yike, who was also kind of a selfish jungler, best at playing for himself specialist, but it only worked because they had Mikyx, who compensated for that playstyle and kind of jungled so that the jungler could just be like another carry on the team, right? So Mikyx was applying pressure on the map, setting up wave states, getting teams push, holding waves, etc., 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 and Yike is just power farming to be huge in fights. So wouldn't Skewmon, who theoretically has an even more versatile champion pool and is even better at carrying than Yike, why not keep Mikyx on the team? Hans Sama specifically requested him, but instead they give him up for Labrov. It also feels like, didn't we learn our lesson in 2022? We let go of Mickey, we get Targamas. Now granted, G2 was happy with Targamas, but we get him back, do amazing. After one more year of giving him away, get him back! How much more clear do we have to make things? Mikyx is the undisputed #1 freaking support in EU. And if it's not going to be Mickey, at least go for Busio, dude. Like, that to me is just so unfathomable. By the way, in 2024, I also wanted them to do something similar when it got announced that the jungle and support were going to be removed. I thought the smartest move ever would have been to try, although I think it would have been impossible because, MKOI would have never let it happen, to try and acquire Elyoya and Alvaro as a duo. That would have been insane. And the thing is, I know I feel so bad. If Labrov ever hears this, if I ever meet him, he's going to be like, dude, you fucking ripped me a new asshole in every single one of your videos. I'm truly not trying to spread any hate, but, whatever. I don't think Skewmon is the main problem, because I actually think if you put Yike and Labrov on a team together, I don't know that it would work. Because the thing is, both players, both junglers are extremely talented, but they need somebody to sacrifice something to make it work. Labrov was at his best when he was paired with Shio, who's a really active, supportive jungler who doesn't want to power farm. He wants to make plays on the map to get his laners ahead, right? To get his carries like Adam and Nuke and Crowny or Ice. He was playing for them. So that duo was perfect. And you would think that would work on this team when you have the firepower of Caps, Hans Sama, and Broken Blade. The problem is, Skewmon is not the jungler who is that proactive, and Labrov is not the proactive part of the relationship. He's supporting the jungler, but this jungler doesn't do shit. So it just doesn't work. Now, you could make the argument that then get rid of Skewmon. I agree. I'm down with that. I think the problem is keeping these two guys together. It's the same problem that I have with players like Razork and Humanoid. I hate on Razork a lot if you watch any of my videos, or you'll find out soon enough. But the point is that I don't think Razork is outright terrible, and I definitely don't think Humanoid's terrible. I just don't think they function together. And it's so annoying to see a team like G2, who has managed teams so much better in the past, to fall short and be so blind to this kind of concept, right? Of you can't just put 5 powerful pieces on paper. It requires sacrifice. Even G2 2019, as amazing as they were, probably a lot of the mileage they got off was, one, you had Mickey, who clearly knows how to play the map and get his laners ahead, and you had Jankos, who was also very good at playing a supportive style, right? I think on the one hand, I just think the players here, Labrov and Skewmon, are way more linear, right? Even when Skewmon is playing more supportive picks, he's playing them in a carry style. He doesn't know how to but he's just not at his best when he has to sacrifice his own resources and play for his laners. And Labrov is not at his best when he doesn't have a jungler to just follow around the whole game. So it's, dude, just extremely frustrating. Now, I will say, in summer, specifically summer finals, these two were on fire. Something clicked, right? Not only were they connected, but they were also, Skewmon was somehow driving the game like never before, right? So when that worked, they both had an insane finals run with 100% kill participation across 3 games. It was genuinely absurd. And it actually gave me a lot of confidence that they would do well at Worlds. I think Skewmon maybe has confidence issues or something, because when he's pushed up against better teams, right, he doesn't have as much of an ability to, make these plays. As a jungler myself, and this is a freaking platinum emerald take at best, I know that I typically sway away from ganking as I get into higher and higher elo, because I imagine that the ganks are not going to be as successful, right? People aren't going to make as many mistakes. So maybe Skewmond is like, yeah, he looks like a god when he's playing against lower level teams, but then when you put him up against, Eastern teams, maybe there's some anxiety, maybe there's some feeling of, this gank would work against, domestic opponents, but against international ones, I don't think it's going to work as well. And that's real, bro, I get it. But that just goes to show maybe this is not an international level player yet. Who knows? Now, all of this may be for naught because Skewmond and Labrov don't seem to be the problem in these 3 losses. They don't seem phenomenal, but they seem to be the only parts of the team that are actually making shit happen. And it seems like Broken Blade, Caps, and Hans are all showing uncharacteristically weak performances. The thing is, this also happened in 2025. The excuse at the time, which this is a legitimate excuse, is that solo laners like Caps and BB will sometimes look like they're inting when they feel the pressure to create a lead because they don't trust their teammates to get them to the late game where they can truly carry, right? They feel like if they don't create a lead, the game will just get away from them. But in this instance, if Skewmond and Labrov truly are at the very least functioning, I'm not saying they're superb, but at least if they're functioning, then why are these 3 parts so especially weak? This is a big, Jesus Christ, I realize it's getting a little bit unstructured here. A big concern of mine, and is truly that I feel like G2 is wasting Caps' time. So so Caps at the end of 2020, or in the middle of 2025, his contract was going to end in 2025, and he shockingly had not signed a contract extension. And him and his agent had expressed an interest in exploring other options, right? There was some excitement that he might join Fnatic. Who knows? He might have joined MKOI, honestly, because I think you would take Caps over Jojo Pune as much as I love Jojo. But midway through the year, through conversations, especially with Romain, who's the general manager of G2, Caps decides to re-sign. Supposedly, not because Caps' interest is not so much in the money, his interest is in being on the best team possible, which gave me the hope, since this is in the middle of 2025, that G2 was already preparing to make changes to this roster, potentially acquiring Kalist, swapping out Labrov for Mickey, getting inspired. That was my number one idea, and I have a video that I made that I never posted, but that's a story for another day. But I did predict that, and it was wrong, whatever. But I was really hoping we'd see big change, and then we did it, right? So it really just feels like, dude, I feel like the LEC and G2 especially are taking Caps for granted. It is already so ridiculously impressive how top of his game Caps has been for so many years, but at a certain point, especially with him getting older, and I don't think age is a matter of hand-eye coordination or reaction time. I think age is more about your ability to dedicate hours to this game when, as you get older, you want to live a life, have a girlfriend, a family, etc., right? You want to explore other hobbies. How many more years of Caps' prime do we have? In a conversation with my buddy Ro, he said that he thinks Caps' prime is actually over, and we're in the second, obviously we're probably in the second half of his career, but we're in the half where it gets worse. And that's a really, really sad prospect to me. So it's really frustrating that G2, which is usually a risky roster, or a risky org, did not take a chance and, go for Inspired and Busio, which, by the way, that's not even a risk, bro. I think it's a fucking no-brainer. And dude, honestly, I just don't think Skewmond and Labrov are going to magically connect. I don't see this roster being the one that wins Worlds. I just don't. I don't think Labrov is strong enough, both on a macro sense and on a micro sense. It doesn't even seem like him and Hansama have a particularly strong lane phase and freaking dominant, lane performance. Again, Labrov is more known for teaming up with his jungler. So I just don't get it. And I do think maybe Labrov and Skewmond would be successful on different rosters, but certainly not together. And I think Busio and fucking Inspired are just plug and play, a duo that knows how to play together. And sorry, it's dusty in here. they would have created leads. Damn, I've never had dust in here before. All right. The last thing that I feel, which is really upsetting, is that I worry that this is G2 detached management, sort of not being knowledgeable, I think is the best way to say it. Because I do think G2 management is concerned with G2 doing well, which is a great thing to have on paper. The problem is, I think G2 management is coming from a perspective of just wanting to see the results, right? It's probably dudes in suits that are just like, hey, G2 2024 didn't make quarterfinals for the second year in a row. Blow up the roster. Do something. It's unacceptable that this is happening, right? And that's probably a part of the reason why they made certain changes. It's notable to mention that Jankos in a co-stream, I believe I mentioned this in my Mickey X video, said that the players, aka Broken Blade, Caps, and Hansama, who were going to stay after G2 2024, were not spoken to about the roster changes. That is so fucking unacceptable, dude. And so it just goes to show that they probably were not unhappy with Yike and Mickey, but they had to keep their mouths shut because, they just wanted to keep their jobs safe, I guess you could say. I was really hoping that the G2 2026 plans were big changes built around Caps so that he could be confident that they would do well internationally. It's clear now that although Caps does have big sway in terms of the management, it seems like the management has really taken back a lot of power, and so Caps is not the GM we all thought he was. And I'm just worried that G2 and the management and the middle management, likely Romain, who is the general manager and has to report to the higher-ups of G2, probably because he was very happy that they made quarters, even though if I was feeling like it wasn't as impressive as 2024, I know Romain knows that deep down in his heart. I imagine he was happy because now he could report to the higher-ups that they had a successful year. They accomplished their goal and they went a little bit further into Worlds than the years prior. And that really sucks because it is so evidently misleading. This roster is not stronger than G2 2024, and I'm calling it now. I don't think they are going to be. I think this team, if they get a shitty draw at Worlds, they're probably not going to make quarters. It all depends on the luck of the draw all over again. And it's annoying that I fucking said that in 2024, and it's only taken to 2025 now that everybody's admitting it. I freaking said it. You can go back and watch the video. Whatever. I think that's low-key it. I'm really upset. I'm worried that we're wasting Caps' peak. I also think, and this, I really mean this, because I'm starting to, first of all, I don't want to be a hater, needlessly, and whatever. I want great talent to be in EU. So I actually think it's harming Lebrov and Skumon. I know I did that backwards. I think it's hurting the both of them because they just clearly don't function together, and they both would be happier on different teams with different teammates. And I think that's just my opinion. So anyway, I think I'll end it here. I mean, I could always just revisit this topic some other time. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you like the video, definitely like it, subscribe. I'm going to attempt to be more frequent with postings. Right now, once a week is guaranteed, but we might get up there. Daily is probably the goal. We'll see. I don't want to take up more of your time and lose retention, so peace out.